My name is Matthew Todd and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Really pleased today to be joined by Luba Chudnovets, CEO, co-founder of Cordless. Great to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Looking forward to finding out more about Cordless and about the Cordless journey as well. But to kick things off, to give our audience a brief overview as to exactly what it is that you do at Cordless, can you give us a bit of an intro?
Yeah, of course. So we're building a phone system with AI-driven conversation intelligence for customer support teams. In terms of the problem that we're solving, imagine that you're a customer support leader who really cares about the quality of your support, but you have hundreds and hundreds of calls per week. And it's impossible really to listen to all of your calls and understand what's really going on. So this is the problem we're solving. We're offering a really user-friendly phone system, but on top of that, we'll help you unlock your voice content and essentially be able to get a view of 100% of your conversations, exactly what's going on, how your team is doing, first-time resolution, how your customers are feeling. And then, of course, you can use it for much better decision-making in terms of both improving the product and also improving the service quality.
Sure. No, sounds really interesting. And we'll definitely get into more detail about exactly what that means. But you've been running Cordless for a couple of years now, I think, at time of recording. So what was it that led you to spot this problem, spot the opportunity, and head in this direction?
Yeah, sure. So my background is I used to be head of scaling operations at Monzo Bank. And so I spent a fair amount of time building customer support teams. And especially my experience was building a very high growth company where everything is changing all the time. And I think that sense of things are changing, you have to have very good information about what customers are actually getting in touch with you about. It's not enough to just have a couple of tags and listen to 6 calls per week. This is what typical manager does. And so it was very clear that having this data, being able to react to those changes is very, very important. The reason I personally went into building startups, so after having joined Monzo at the very early stage, I think there were about 30 people back then, and having gone through this exponential growth, I felt that it was a natural next step for me. That would be extremely hard for me to find a company that would be a match in terms of my personal learning curve. And so it felt like, okay, I'm going to try and build my own business. And there were a couple of problems that I could see right away after having that experience within customer support. I think the other important factor for me was that I met my co-founder. So my co-founder, she's also ex-Monzo. We worked together building customer support, but she was a tech lead on the customer support team. So she was building internal tools. And when we had that conversation, already having left Monzo, that we both want to do it, and now is the right time, and customer support is the area we want to focus on, it felt like I have to make this leap right now. Like there won't be a better time to do that.
Yeah. So it's very much both of you having real personal experience of scaling those teams and seeing the problems that were not being solved in an ideal way that then kind of gave birth to that idea of trying to solve it the way that you're doing now?
I think there was a lot of iteration on the way. I think we very quickly narrowed down that we want to work in the customer support space. And we had a lot of hypotheses that we wanted to test. But it's one thing having experienced it at one company and then starting to talk to companies that operate potentially very differently. So Monzo is a very special place in a lot of different ways. For example, we were building our own tech. Most companies don't do that for things that are not core part of their business. And so when we started speaking to heads of customer support, we definitely went through a lot of iteration and figuring out, okay, so out of all these pain points that I'm talking about, what are the most crucial ones? So our initial idea, I think, was much more focused on workforce management and scheduling, actually. But then very quickly we came back to telephony and this issue of having data to make better decisions. And especially phone systems and voice came up so many times as a channel that is extremely disconnected, that it's very hard to analyze. You don't know what's going on there. But at the same time, customers do call and really, really value this channel and how important it is, especially for this channel to perform really well there, because your team needs to know the answer right away. You can't just walk away and check it as you would with an email and chat. And so very, very slowly we came that to the conclusion that we should be working on voice.
I see. And how were those pain points, those problems articulated then by those companies that you were talking to?
So by the way, after we decided to work together, we went through Entrepreneur First. And for the first 2-3 months of us working together, all we did was we were speaking to heads of customer support. And I think we spoke to about 100 different people.
Wow.
And I think we sometimes started very broadly about their key pain points, what do they struggle with, like quite open questions. But again, like phone came up a lot. And so the key things that they were talking about was how expensive it is, but customers still expected a channel that is not integrated well into the rest of their communications and tech stack. And also how difficult it is to actually engage with this as a manager. Again, having hundreds of calls, it's extremely, extremely hard to know what is going on. But just to give you a bit of context about customer support. So heads of customer support, they optimize for offering really, really great quality to their customers in terms of service, so they can resolve their issues quickly, but at the same time, being able to do that at a certain budget. So these are two things that they have to try and balance. And they found it especially difficult to do with phone. And so this is the reason we decided to focus on that issue and trying to make their job much, much easier.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I can certainly see why those two goals are potentially in competition with each other if you take them to an extreme, right? So you've got to be very careful, I imagine, about the way that you optimize them. So I can certainly see that data that you're talking about would be a useful and a valuable way to try and do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you mentioned the kind of Entrepreneur First program that you went through. Then what was that experience like? How did that research kind of phase help you crystallize exactly what you should be doing?
Yeah, so for me personally, it was a really useful experience. I'm a first-time founder, so a lot of things I'm doing for the first time. And I think when you're starting a business, it's really helpful to have a peer group that are going through the same experience that you can talk to, ask really stupid questions, compare your notes and experiences, and someone you can really easily get feedback from. So in that sense, Entrepreneur First for us was really, really helpful. And we had several, say, very wise mentors, both from with slightly different experiences. One was someone who already built and sold a business, and the other one had a more of a VC view. And so they both gave us feedback from these different perspectives of how to tell a story, but also how to sell and also close customers. And I don't know, if you're trying to sign your first contract, what are the things that must be in your contract that you should think about? For example, signing them up to case studies. I would have never thought of this if someone didn't point out, but it seems so obvious in the retrospect. So for me, it was extremely useful from these three perspectives. So peer group, feedback, and then feedback from experienced people, and sort of just like being pushed that, okay, right now I have all the time, I'm doing this full time, just going for it. And again, we managed to talk to so many people and really shape our hypothesis back then.
Yeah, and with that hypothesis then, what was that initial build and initial validation process like? Because I imagine, like, unlike some types of tech products that you might want to develop kind of more minimal versions and try and get people to use some of those features, call center software is pretty integral to handling those calls. So I imagine there must have been a pretty significant build process.
Yes, definitely. So at first, one of the issues we decided to focus on was the fact that phone support is extremely expensive and that it's very often disintegrated from the rest of the tools. So the first minimum viable product that we built was around helping companies manage their calls asynchronously, which meant that if someone calls, we would prompt them to leave a voicemail with their phone number, their issue, and things like that, which we will then transcribe and send it to the CRM of the customer. This was our very, very first, very simple MVP. And we managed to find 3 companies that signed the pilot with us. So at the time, this is what helped us raise pre-seed rounds and also get funding from Entrepreneur First. So the idea at first was that we will help them build out this kind of callback system and help them manage the volume of calls. But as we raised the seed round and as we were still testing this idea and trying to figure out which way to develop it, we realized that probably it was quite difficult for companies to integrate. So there was a significant process of significant engineering effort required on their side to actually make this work, as well as ours.
Yeah.
And so slowly we came to the conclusion that actually we should build this with a phone system. And so about, I think, 4 months after raising a pre-seed round, we decided that, okay, we need to build a phone system and we need to commit to this. This will take many months, that it becomes actually like a good enough product that we can be selling. And this is the point where we decided to hire our first engineers as well.
I see. So you really had to level up the ambitions of what you were building because of those integration problems. So rather than create more integration problems as you scale, you're essentially eliminating them by providing a complete solution.
Yes, exactly. I think one of the things we realized, and something that I definitely had a bias when I came to this, Monzo was a very strong tech company. So we had no problem integrating various tools, and customer support teams always had supportive engineers. We actually had a very large engineering team dedicated to building out customer support. But this is not the norm at all. This is definitely an exception. For the majority of companies, customer support teams are left to their own devices. So they don't actually have engineers supporting them, and heads of customer support have to figure out those things themselves. And as soon as we started selling this, we realized that actually the tool that most of these people need is something that they can really easily take. It's really user-friendly. They understand how it works. They can train their team and they can set up their perfect process. So it needs to be quite easy, but also flexible. And these are the principles we had when we set out to build a phone system.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I can certainly see it without those engineering capabilities. It could have been pretty complex to integrate, but then you're taking on all of that complexity as well as, competing against a lot of those other, call center, contact center systems, phone systems that they've already got in place. I guess that must have been a pretty significant undertaking for you to start. How was it committing to doing that?
Yes, I think it all comes down to narrowing down your segment and who you're really doing this for. So through all of these conversations we had of heads of customer support, we really narrowed it down for us. So first of all, we were very clearly focusing on customer support rather than sales. Phone systems sometimes overlap, but actually requirements are quite different in a lot of ways. The second thing, we were focusing on mid-sized companies, which essentially fit this criteria of already having quite sophisticated needs, but at the same time not ready for enterprise. But it's not a tool that is completely like a toy where you just get a phone number. That's pretty much it. So, these are still the segment that we're serving. right? So this is a segment which has quite sophisticated needs, but at the same time, they either haven't graduated to enterprise and they already have more needs than your typical phone system from like a basic level. And then very quickly, we also realized that as we started working on this, that like I think right now we're in a very unique position where this new technology around speech to text and text to speech and AI and ChatGPT is now just taking massive strides. And a lot of the telephony tools, they don't actually offer this either at all or on very, very basic level. And so this is when we realized that actually we should try and focus on this area much more. That fundamentally, we do believe that everyone who's doing voice will be analyzing their conversations in much more detail. And this is the part we can really make a difference for the customer support teams. And so this is why we sort of went through this process of fitting everything from like starting from pain points and realizing, okay, that integration part doesn't quite work. Then if you go into phone system, which segment we have to be really clear. And then adding on this bit around, okay, technology improved dramatically. We have to take advantage of this and make it available to heads of customer support to really make their operations better.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see how those different elements all come together to give you quite a compelling proposition against those pain points, against those challenges. And as you say, the kind of evolution of technology and what's possible by building from the ground up, I can see that you're able to target those in a more efficient and more specific way for that segment as well. So I can certainly see the kind of the power behind that decision to head in that direction. I think it's certainly transforms, the typical customer call center type of messaging. These calls may be recorded for training purposes. Well, actually, it's usually complaints, but it certainly then, changes that completely and turns it into a tool that's giving you that real-time information that they can act on. And, for anyone listening, I think it'd be really interesting. You kind of give some examples of, the types of data that you can surface and how people are then able to use that and act on that.
Yeah, of course. So, for instance, one of the core metrics within customer support is first-time resolution. So let's say someone called or got in touch, they do manage to actually solve their issue first time around. So right now, it's actually very hard to say. So you just look at repeat contacts and things like that, and you have to try and stitch all of this data together. What you can do with Cordless, you can ask a question and say, was this resolved or not? And we will tag every conversation appropriately with essentially driven by ChatGPT. And you can ask any questions that you want. So for instance, for regulatory business, it's extremely important that you comply to certain requirements, that you have checked someone's identity before revealing any information, that you have, let's say, informed that this is advice, or there are all sorts of things that you might have to do. And again, for a regulatory business, it will be crucial to actually demonstrate that you're doing this and being able to coach your team to do that. And you might only be able to do it sporadically. But now with Cordless, you can again just ask these questions, and for all of your conversations, we will tell you if this happened or not. So that's just one part of it, which will dramatically simplify. The second example is sentiment analysis. So imagine right now, to actually understand how your customers are feeling about an interaction, I'm sure you've received customer satisfaction surveys. But in reality, the percentage of people who fill them out is like around 20-30%. And usually it's people who are either very happy or people who are very unhappy. So how do you judge the quality of your support based on this data? It's very hard. So right now we can do it programmatically. We can essentially say, can you detect certain words? Can you give us alerts about potential complaints? Can you, on average, analyze the sentiment towards the end of the conversation to understand whether the problem was resolved or not? And again, you get 100% of data on all of your calls, and then you can know where to focus your time and efforts. So let's say out of 100 conversations, you can see that 5 had a slightly more negative sentiment. You can go into this conversation, see what happened, what was the question about, was it a particular person that maybe needs a little bit more support on this topic, or maybe no one in your team knows how to deal with this completely new bug that the product is experiencing. So you can really nail down and understand exact drivers of how your team and your product are doing.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. As you say, there's the compliance thing, but the ability to see product trends as well as information about the team, it kind of allows you to surface data from kind of different perspectives, about the company, about the product, about the customers, all from being able to analyze those calls at scale. So I think that's a really kind of interesting use of technology, an interesting way to leverage those calls where perhaps you do actually get more information conveyed than you might on a chat bot or an email support request or something like that. But I can see how previously it would have been quite difficult to actually surface any of that data and those insights.
Yeah, exactly. And now you can also, if you want to find out about any particular topic, you can also just search through your whole volume of conversations and find out if anyone's talking about it, if it's trending up or down. And it becomes so much easier to, again, like just give feedback back to the rest of the company and also coach your team.
No, absolutely. So, with that perspective, then with that, idea for, tackling those problems in that way, once you then, successfully manage to build that technology, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about how you are then able to take that to go, to market. What did that go to market strategy look like? How are you actually, able to generate interest in the product and convert that into customers?
Yeah. Sure. So our first customers, as I think with a lot of B2B startups, they all came from warm introductions. So I think this is quite typical in our network.
Yeah.
Right now, of course, we're at a stage when we're trying to scale and figure out repeatable ways of finding customers. And for us, it's a couple of channels. So the first one is marketplaces of help desks. So I'll give you a very specific example. So we, of course, provide only the voice channel. But for majority of customer support teams, they would need email and chat, maybe social channels for their support as well. And so there are a lot of help desks, for example, Intercom or Front, that only do the text-based channels. And so we integrate with them because, of course, their customers require voice. So anyone who starts, let's say, with integrating Front at some point needs voice, will go to their marketplace and explore the products that are available there. So this is channel number one. The second one is we're investing a lot into content marketing. Right now, I strongly believe anyone who does a B2B business has to invest into content marketing and SEO. So we hired a fantastic head of marketing, very experienced marketing person who's essentially working on our SEO strategy. And so we are consistently growing our following, our traffic to the website, publishing useful things for heads of customer support and things like that. So essentially working on creating inbound for us.
I see. No, interesting. So very kind of educational then for those heads of customer support.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to engage with them more. And I think later down the line, potentially create a community as well. So that's sort of the inbound part of our strategy. And number three is outbound. So we actually had 2 people start recently, our business development managers. So we also do cold outreach. We contact people who we think this might be a good fit for. A couple of our customers came this way. Actually, apart from warm introduction, the majority came this way. So it definitely works. And right now we're exploring different ways of doing it in a more targeted way, let's put it this way. So that things like using intent data, like whether people are actually searching for terms that might indicate that they're interested in our solutions, visiting particular websites. So it's not just blindly getting in touch with a lot of people. So these are the core 3 things for us.
No, interesting. I think, definitely echo what you say with the outbound approach. I think, there are a lot of tools that can give you very good kind of demographics and data and contact data, but then it's finding the people within that would be a good customer and would be a good person to approach at this time as well. That can be tricky. And I know that outbound can take a while to get to work for a lot of people, but I think once it is up and running, it can certainly be a very, very successful strategy.
Yeah, I think so. So we're definitely at stages. I think we've done several iterations on this, and I think we have examples where it works quite well, but I think we're still definitely at the stage when we're iterating and trying to find the right approach. I think it will be first time where we had 2 people start. We'll be focusing on this full time. So I'm very excited.
No, absolutely. And how have you found the journey as a first time founder kind of getting to this point? Because it sounds like it has been a pretty impressive journey to this point and, a few pivots and things along the way, but certainly, you're building something seriously impressive and very new and innovative to the market.
I think it's definitely hard to be a founder. There's a lot of ups and downs. I think I've been really, really lucky in a lot of ways. I have a fantastic co-founder, and I think it really, really helps to have a partner where you really trust each other and you help pick up each other up when you feel things are not going as planned. So to anyone who thinks about starting a business, I would really recommend not doing it alone and actually finding a co-founder that you can work well together. I think it's an amazing experience when you are building something that people love using. It genuinely is. And so whenever I speak to our customers and they give us feedback, it makes me so incredibly happy. So I don't know, it's very special being able to build something that didn't exist before and actually make someone's life much, much easier. So I think that part is great. It's been really exciting to grow the team as well. I remember when we were first trying to hire our first engineer, this thought of why would anyone go work for us when we have nothing? I mean, raise the round, okay? We have good idea. We have some customers, but still, why would anyone want to be a first employee? And that first experience of convincing someone to join you and slowly building this into a very efficient, in some ways, very efficient company, which is operates quite well and have a good relationship. And I'm very proud of our culture. There are a lot of things to be proud of. So I think we've been around for just over 2 years. It feels much longer, of course, but I'm really glad I chose this journey, and we'll see how it goes afterwards. I think there are a lot of unknowns, there are a lot of ambiguity on the way, but I think we already achieved something important, and it's been good overall.
No, I think it's really interesting to hear, and I think it's clear that you do have that passion for customer support and customer success, and that customer-driven approach then carries through everything that you do. And I think, I think it was a good move for you to be able to take that step to say, okay, these integrations are painful, rather than, like some companies may have been tempted to do, blame the customer, think, oh no, we're going to have to add this to it, add that, to try and do this for them or educate them. But actually you took a braver step to say, well, okay, let's build the right thing from the ground up. I think that's a bold move, but one that sounds like it should deliver ultimately a much better customer experience on top of that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it was definitely a very bold move. But the thing is, I think companies get replaced all the time. There's always a new wave of innovation coming just because new technology becomes available. And I think this is the case for us. Of course, this market is extremely competitive. There are a lot of phone systems available. But we're building it in a way where we take all the latest amazing tech and make it available to heads of customer support. I think there's a lot of potential disruption in that space, despite high competition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I certainly wish you the best of luck on disrupting that industry and those legacy players. But for any other founders listening to this, whether they are, a couple of years in like you, or whether they're earlier on in their journey, is there any other advice that you would give them in terms of, building and shaping their company based on the lessons that you've learned over the last couple of years?
Choosing the right co-founder, 100%. I think this is a very long journey. It's only been 2.5 years for me, but most companies, it takes 5-6 years to build. So choosing an area that you're genuinely interested in, it's really important. Customers, it's all about customers and building the products that they want. So I'm really glad actually that we started a company and we hired our first engineer only 6 months in. And the reason for that, because we were doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of customers. And I think it's still the case in terms of how we run the company. We try to be very practical and driven by customer feedback. It sounds very obvious, but I think it's really, really easy to go astray with this and get into company building and culture building and all these things. But there's nothing more important than building products that customers want. And this is what we try to do.
No, absolutely. I think that's great advice. And I think I've certainly seen companies before that have that initial spark of an idea, but perhaps are more in love with the opportunity or they're more in love with the solution that they've imagined rather than the customer and the problems they're solving. So then ultimately end up building the wrong thing for too long and perhaps realizing too late that actually there's no market for what they wanted to build, and it doesn't really matter what you want to build. It's about what the customers need. And I think you've kind of articulated that and the way that carries through your approach very well. So I think that, that's great advice. And I think something that founders should definitely, be paying attention to.
Yeah. I think the reality is it's very hard to be really honest with yourself when you've invested, many months of your life trying to build something and then you just struggle selling. And there are different ways how you can rationalize it and explain it. But it's really important to try and be honest and actually say, okay, maybe it's not working. Let us try something else. Let us try pivots. And it could be really, really hard to communicate it to both your team and investors and maybe even your customers that are using a product that you actually don't want to develop in the way that you hoped for initially. So I think this is a really, really hard choice. And I think we went through a couple of pivots like that. It took quite early stages still, but I can definitely relate to that feeling of making that decision to, okay, this is not working and admitting it. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it can be hard to tell what's not working. Is it your marketing skills? Is it your sales skills? Is it the messaging around the product? Is it the way that you're positioning it? Is it the market that you're reaching out? There are so many variables that, I think it can definitely be a challenge to work that out. But I think, a very customer-driven attitude and research-driven attitude is going to help, combined with being surrounded by the right people you can tap into for advice as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's something about perseverance. It is, as you said, you don't actually know what is not working. And everyone talks a lot about perseverance in startups and how you should keep going and, keep pushing. And that's true. Of course, you have to. But I think there is a point where you have to admit if something is not working. And and it's not giving up. It's just taking another turn.
No, absolutely. And I think that's great advice. And I think it's a good way to kind of round off the conversation for now. So thank you for sharing that Cordless journey so far. I think there's a number of really interesting points that anyone listening to this can take away from it. And I look forward to seeing how Cordless as a platform develops, as a company develops as well. So thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.